Good morning, you beautiful bunch of fuckers, and welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. It's Tuesday, March 10th. It's time for some Power Hour. I see we've got Eric in the house. I think Bruce is going to be joining us in about 30 minutes or so. Phone lines are open. Since we only have two people telling stories this morning, we'll be able to get to calls quicker. Bruce is the longest storyteller of the group. At least that's my claim. So jump in and join us, 855-950-3835. We'll get to your calls here pretty quickly, so jump in and join us. What else do we got going on today? Oh, I don't know. I'll figure it out. Let's bring in Eric, and we'll just get started. Eric, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
I'm scatterbrained these days. That's not like me, but there's just so much going on. It's a very interesting time to be alive, and I'm interested in everything. So I'm feeling a little overwhelmed these days.
I feel your pain, but mine's in a different aspect because my youngest son, who is he'll be 15 next week, is in a lot of advanced classes.
Oh,
and
boy.
It was advanced literacy. Or literature, advanced literature. And man, you talk about scatterbrained. I'm like, wow, this is just rough. So yeah, we were up pretty trying to get ready for that.
I am a huge reader, but I hated school. So I took all the easiest classes I could possibly take. I had, believe it or not, foods 1, foods 2, advanced foods. I had a culinary degree by the time I got out of high school because I did like food. So that and study halls, that was most of my schedule for the day. But I love to read. I didn't really get exposed to a lot of the classics you would if you took those advanced courses, in English and literature and that kind of stuff. But I tried some of the classics. Honestly, about half of them suck. They are awful.
Yeah.
Like, how did some of those books ever become a classic? Some of them are really good.
Wow.
Some of them I really, really like. And there's some of those authors, Hemingway. I actually really like Hemingway's stuff. Really interesting. One of them that sticks out to me I felt like I'll never get that time back after reading the book, and I didn't understand the book. I have no idea why it's a classic, was Catcher in the Rye. I don't get anything about that book. It was awful.
Yep. We just finished up Anne Frank Diary.
That's a good
one. Which is
one.
interesting.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It makes you really reflect and think about your own life, too.
Yeah,
but now we're on Midsummer. But yeah, we had one that was about a guy who was like a famous blacksmith, and then he got burnt real bad, and it was just a weird, and I remember still, that was last year's books, but it was like, oh my goodness, this is a classic?
Some of them are painful to get through.
I was laughing at you when you said you had a degree in culinary because we, again, have a lot more in common than you realize. I did the same thing. There was international foods, so we got to make different around the world.
Right.
I took another class called Single Survival, which was actually kind of good. I wish I would teach that in all of them because it not only taught you how to cook the basics, but it taught you like around the kitchen, but it taught you how to sew, how to balance a checkbook, how to write a check. It was all about living on your own.
So
it was actually a really good one.
Let's stop there for a second, because that's a really good point. If we go back when you and I were in high school, we had a lot more practical options. We had a wood shop. We had a metal shop. We had foods classes. We had what was called home ec, which was maybe like that living single kind of thing. There should have been more. There wasn't any then. There never really have been any good programs for like financial literacy. Like you said, balancing a checkbook. What's insurance? What are investments? We should be teaching that to our kids in school. Now, here's something to think about. AI is changing everything about knowledge in so many ways we can't even get our head around. I think that because of that, we should go back to teaching more of the practical stuff, not less. If AI is going to take a bunch of the white-collar jobs, which it's going to, there's just no way to avoid that. And I know some people are saying, oh, no, it's never going to happen. It's already happening. The white collar jobs, the knowledge worker kind of jobs are disappearing to AI. Now, there's also the possibility, I've been studying a lot of these home robots. You may have a home robot doing a bunch of this stuff for you, but you should still understand the basic stuff about living a good life. And we don't teach any of that stuff in school anymore.
No, we need to go back to the basics.
We
for
do.
Sure. Like, I took Art of Baking 1 and 2. Now, I had an alternative. I was the only guy in a class of 21 people. So I had 20 females around me. So
yeah,
I took her all serious.
That was another
but
benefit.
I can cook a bean souffle.
Correct.
To this day, I can cook a bean souffle. But, I had different things on my mind at the time, but I did the exact same thing. It's funny, the more you and I converse back and forth, it's almost like we grew up in parallel universes. It's really funny.
Yeah, we did. Every time we talk, there's something more. I had no idea about the food. I've been into food my whole life, all through high school. I've been cooking ever since. It's why I like to grow food, because I just do a lot of stuff with food.
Same here.
Oh, we were talking about books and school, and how did we even get on that topic? Why were we? Oh, because you said your son. We were talking about being scatterbrained because there's so much information. It is information overload these days.
Yes. Yeah, the stuff that they are trying to cram down an 8th grader's throat is ridiculous, in my opinion. But we are behind in the world educational platform, as they want to call it.
Yeah, we are.
But there's a lot of ways to learn, and that's one of the things I wanted to segue into. What I want to talk about today is you need to learn your strengths and your weaknesses, and how you learn is one of the biggest things. And that's something that I struggled with very, very hard when I was younger, especially in school. I didn't do great in school at all because I'm not a reader. I don't retain anything from reading. If I start reading a book, I'll get into maybe the second or third paragraph, and then my mind is somewhere else. And then about 4 minutes later,
Isn't it weird how, and I am a big reader and I retain well from reading, but not all the time. There are times where I go through that too. My mind will wander. And usually if it's a novel, I don't care. I mean, I'm just reading to kill some time and because it's enjoyable. And this is not an exaggeration. I can finish a novel, put it down, and somebody will look at me and go, what's the title of that book? I'll be like, hell, I don't know. And they'll be like, who's the main character? And I'm like, I'm not sure. It's even worse. Yeah, it's even worse now that I do all my reading on a Kindle. With a book, you always know at least the title and the author because it's right there and you pick up the book all the time. On the Kindle, you don't see that ever. You don't see the title. You don't see the cover. You turn it on and you're right back to where you were reading. Yeah, and there are times where I can't remember the last 3 books I read. What the title was. If they're novels, I just do it for pure enjoyment. Now, if I'm reading to learn and I'm scatterbrained, then I just stop and come back to it later. So I do retain really well when I read. The idea you're talking about, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, that's the standout test that I help people with. It's one of the best I've ever found.
That's what I'm going through with my sons now. They'll be 15 and 17 here, and we're at the point now where in our lives that they need to decide what they're going to do, or at least what field they want to enter in. But a lot of it has to do with knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and the same theory applies to your truck and your business too. You want to know what exactly you can and cannot do, and don't try to overextend yourself, because that's usually how you get in trouble, whether it be financially, physically, emotionally, whatever it might be. Know your boundaries, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and cash in on that, because it'll make you be successful in all aspects of life. Not to segue into this, it's not going to very well, but the next part of what I want to talk about is actually doing some oil samples.
Okay.
And I've tried to learn more and more about it. I try to dive into whether it be I can't even pronounce it, the Elon's AI.
Grok.
Yes.
Yeah.
I usually go to his Chat GPT, And I have a very good building on it too, just like you have with Grok. The more you enter, the more it retains.
Correct. Yeah, actually,
but
my go-to by far is Claude.
Okay.
Claude is the one that Claude is the one that I've trained on multiple projects. And I have Grok, or not Grok, Claude. I have a functional medical version of Claude that I've taught it all the functional medicine stuff. That takes forever. That was one of the worst areas for AI. Be very, very careful about asking AI about your health. It does a beautiful job analyzing blood work and all that other stuff, but its solutions tend to be big pharma based because that's 90% of all the information available. That's what AI was taught on, all the bullshit that big pharma's been putting out for decades. They want to immediately put you on a statin and 6 other prescriptions. So I had to train. That was the big job. I have one trained for oil analysis and maintenance. I have one trained for fuel mileage. I do use Grok as a backup and some other things, but all of my projects are in Claude.
Yep. The whole theory of working smarter, not harder, is exactly true with AI. I've been using it for probably about 6 months now with the oil analysis and the stuff that I've learned. It's phenomenal.
That's the other thing people don't understand. There's a huge pushback on AI across the board. All I see, everybody picked up on the phrase AI slop. First off, the term AI slop was not designed for the way people are using it. If you put out a picture and there's a mistake, somebody calls it AI slop. Oh, look, the guy has, 3 years or something, whatever the mistake is. And it does that kind of stuff all the time. That was not what the term AI slop was meant for. But now that's what it's being used for. There was a very specific reason, and it was in vibe coding. AI tends to write way more than it needs to write. Whether you ask it to write a story or a news article, it does way more than what you need. That's the tendency. And in coding, it writes a whole bunch of code that doesn't need to exist. It doesn't necessarily hurt anything, but it might slow down some pages and that kind of stuff. That was what AI slop was. It was specifically in coding that it just writes too much stuff. But now it's used for, somebody looks at it and goes, oh, that's just AI slop. Well, wait a minute. Did you read it? Here's my take on this. I'm not saying AI is the end all. It's not. It's got a lot of problems. But here's my take. If I read something, I am reading it probably for one of two reasons. I either want to be informed or I want to be entertained, right? Isn't that about the only two reasons we would read something?
Yeah, pretty much.
I either want to be informed or I want to be entertained. So take AI out of the mix for a second. If I read something and it informs me, if it educates me and it's correct, isn't that a good thing? Does it matter that AI wrote it?
Exactly.
It shouldn't. And in reality, what I find is when AI writes something and teaches me something, and I'll ask it to teach me something, it does better than any human being I've ever worked with. Does better than any teacher I've ever had, any class I've ever had. I learn more and I learn faster with AI than anything else I've ever done. I took, and I think you have too, I took a bunch of courses on oil analysis through Horizon. They have great courses. It takes a lot of time to go through those courses and learn that stuff. AI teaches me 10 times faster than that. So this idea, or if I read something that AI wrote and it entertains me, then why do I care that AI wrote it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. As long as you get the right information.
Yeah.
You have to double check yourself. I mean, sometimes I'm still skeptical. But what I've done is actually compounded a lot of new information for the oil analysis, and it's made me do a lot better at it. And when I was going through some of the samples last week, I got a phone call from a customer that wanted my opinion on his oil sample. It wasn't flagged, but this happens a lot. And I just want to make sure that people out there know that even if your sample isn't flagged, you're just not sure, call me. That's what we do here. That's part of the OPS experience. When I started looking at it, though, I noticed how clean everything looked. And the truck had over 1 million miles. So I went up and looked, and it was a DD15 platform. This was Con Trucking. They're out of Florida. They have 3 Freightliners with the DD platform engines in them, and they've been running our Catalyst since its debut in 2017, 18. So it's probably been about 8, 9 years they've been running it. All 3 of these trucks have over 1 million miles, 1 million plus miles, and they all 3 have the original one box.
Nice.
Now, most of the people out there that either own a DD platform or know somebody that has. That's nothing short of a miracle. Most of the one boxes we saw before the Catalyst, we'd probably have an average lifespan around 650 to 750,000 miles, give or take a little bit.
Exactly what I was going to say. That was my same experience with calls.
Yep, it's like you can set your watch to it, and then it would throw an SCR efficiency code. Now, that code could either be a sensor replacement or the death sentence of your one box, and that's going to be $12,000 to $15,000 repair. So if you're looking for a used truck out there, that's something to keep considering in the back of your mind. In a one box, though, it has a DOC and 2 DPF filters and a decomp area that introduces the urea and then the SCR. Now, the SCR is made up of precious metals that are the last line of defense before your exhaust gases are released into the atmosphere, and they cannot be replaced. And what you want to do is think of that as like a sandstone in a river. If you throw a sandstone in there, the more current that goes across it, the faster the erosion. And that's the same thing that's happening with these precious metals. The worst stuff of your exhaust that gets past the first 3 sections, your DOC, your 2 DPFs, and the urea, the more work the SCR has to do, and the faster it will get depleted of those precious metals. And that's why the Catalyst just makes sense. If you think about it like that, the cleaner the exhaust going in, the less work the emission system has to do. And by eliminating all the bad stuff in the combustion chamber, where we are essentially killing it at the root of its cause, this is how it affects all trucks with emissions. That sometimes it's hard to justify the cost of a product without seeing or feeling the difference factor. When you buy a new car, you get that new car smell, that new car feel, the shine, everything. You get like a value perception in your mind. But think of this as, and I'm going to play on my fat card here, eating a salad or a bag of Cheetos for lunch. They'll both fill you up. I'm not going to answer on which one I had yesterday, but
right.
We'll just go. But you got to look at what the long-term effects. What is the most important thing you can do to have a successful and plenish or profitable business? If you just kind of go through the paces and you kind of roll the dice and say, good Lord's on my side, I got some good luck going, I'm just going to roll the dice on it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
We know that the systems are going to fail. And they will no matter what you do. Don't get me wrong. This isn't
Correct.
like a cure-all.
No.
But when you look at the numbers, statistically speaking, when you run the Catalyst, it is phenomenal results, and phenomenal odds are in your favor to stay on the road and be successful and keep the loads going. So I just wanted to share that story with you about Con, because I was kind of shocked that 3 trucks that they run, and they run Florida, and they don't go that far. I want to say like up into the Carolinas was about the furthest north they went, and then maybe over in around Texas, I think was the furthest west. So geographically, they're in a nice, warm, flat climate. I get that. But that can also be a detriment to the emissions because you're not having to work it as hard. When the emissions first came out, we were talking to people like Paul Carmine, from your like customers in Australia or Pacific Northwest or up in Canada. These guys that were pulling trains, 125, 150,000 pound loads, stuff like that, they didn't have all the problems that the other guys were having. You would talk to another guy that, he might run 62 mile per hour, doesn't have an APU, idle overnight, and man, his truck's in the shop like every other day. Well, it's because you're not creating the heat, and that's the whole purpose of the Catalyst. So I just wanted to touch on that subject and share that story about Con and his trucks.
So Let's take that another step, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's a new pattern we're seeing. The idea that, one, diesel engines don't burn oil anymore. I still have a hard time getting my head around that, because for almost 40 years, every diesel engine I owned burned oil. They all did. It was just that's how they work. That's not true anymore. They just don't burn oil. We're seeing some trucks at 1,000,000 miles still not burning oil. What's the
Yeah.
future of these trucks? How long can we keep them? And what are we going to do with them? How much has the in-frame side of things changed? Do you guys do nearly as many as you used to?
Not as many, but we still do a good bit of them. That was the next part I was going to talk about. Actually, you made the perfect segue for that one.
Oh, good.
But we do quite a few in frames yet. But I would say the majority of our work is diagnostics on emission systems, troubleshooting that other shops cannot fix or find the culprit for, just the hard to get stuff, But back to the in frame. I was talking to a customer the other day about in frames, and there is a general conception of what an in frame should and should not include. I kind of want to say that I don't want to say we set the bar for it, but I've seen so many different estimates from other shops over the years that when you're shopping for an in frame or you're planning for an in frame, it should include the pistons, the rings, the liner seals, main and rod bearings, connecting rods, a cylinder head bolts, because those are stretched to yield, injectors, thermostats, all the gaskets in that area. And I'm going to highlight that on that as a second, and all your fluids and filters. Some people will say, you guys want $35,000 to do an in-frame. My local shop will do it for $9,000. Why are you guys so expensive? Well, first off, they're not doing a full in-frame for $9,000.
Wait a minute.
You cannot do it.
There's still people claiming to do in-frames for $9,000?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Oh.
absolutely. But and the key phrase here is apples to apples, not apples to oranges.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say, no, they can't. I can assure you they are nowhere near that number. So send me over the estimate. You can white out the name. You can white out the prices, part numbers. I just want to see their list of materials. Or read it to me over the phone.
Sure.
And it'll say 6-cylinder kits and an oil pan set. That's not an in-frame. That's a bottom end. And they don't even have everything on there that you need to do that. You still need a headset. You still need, this and that. And it's amazing to me what people consider to be an in-frame or an out-of-frame, an in-frame or on different levels of that. But that is your basic, what do I want to say, your grocery list for an in-frame rebuild. The front structure and the rear structure are not covered in an in-frame because this is one of the bigger struggles I had coming from the automotive world to the diesel truck world when I first started here, because I didn't understand how that engine was actually put together. But if you lift the hood of your car, you can see the engine or truck. You can see the engine in there. You have a water pump usually up front. And I'm going to pick on a conventional V8. There's something that we've been using for eons. When you lift the hood, you see the valve covers, you see the intake manifold, you see the throttle body, the injectors. You look at the water pump up front, and everything is bolted to the block. Everything is an accessory up front. On the semis, though, with the front structure being a front gear-driven accessory drive, that housing stays bolted to the block, but we don't take that off. When you do an in-frame, you're working from the valve cover down to the oil pan and up and down vertically. You're not going horizontally out of that picture. There's a couple engines that you do have to get in, a couple little pieces here and there, but for the majority of this conversation, it's just going to be up and down vertically working.
Yeah.
So when you talk to a shop, make sure that, number one, they have the tools to do the job. Ask the questions. If it needs counterbore, can you cut the counterbores? If it needs the counterbore cut, do you have the different tool for different engines? Caterpillar, Cummins, Detroit. If it needs a line board, are you guys capable of doing an out of frame? What do you look at the main and rod bearings? What parts do you look at and inspect as you're doing the rebuild? Because when you get inside the engine and you start tearing it apart, you don't want to just zing every nut and bolt out and throw it in a bucket and then just start doing a rebuild. You want to look at the story it's going to tell you. If we pull an engine apart and I see a main bearing that's worn on one side versus the other, I know there's a problem with the line bore. Is the crankshaft bent? Is there a problem going on somewhere? That's something that you really need to evaluate and look at in depth, because that will cause a future problem. If you rebuild an engine that has a bent crankshaft, there was a side load on the bearing, guess what? You're going to have the same problem on the new engine. It's not, you're not fixing anything there. So you definitely want to look at all the parts and pieces you're taking apart, inspect them, clean them. Even though they may end up going in a garbage can, it doesn't matter. Learning is power. Knowledge is power in this case. And this is where a lot of the gearheads I see in our industry and farmers really excel at this, because we've broken stuff enough times to know what will cause a failure.
Right.
I can look at a broken bolt and say, this was a fresh fracture. Or, hey, this has been going on for a long time. Do you see the corrosion all the way up to this point? And then the last 15% of the metal is nice and clean.
Yeah.
So that means it just finally go. But this will be going on for a long time. So there's different clues that you're going to pick up along the way whenever you're doing this. But when you are looking for a rebuild or planning for a rebuild, these are some of the things you need to keep into your mind. Am I taking it to a legitimate shop? Are they going to get me in and out in a timely manner? What if they encounter other problems? That happens a lot. People will call me and say, okay, what's this going to cost? That's the number one thing in their head. And I tell people it can be anywhere from this to this. Well, why such a big window? Well, here's why. Unless you can tell me exactly what parts are worn out and exactly what parts need to be replaced in your engine, I can't give you an exact estimate. We can only give you a rough ballpark. Sometimes it's pretty close. Sometimes we leave a large window because we just don't know until we get in there and tell the story. And most people are pretty understanding about this, because it usually isn't their first rodeo down the rebuild path. But some of you listening may never have had one before, or maybe you get a new truck every 3 or 4 years. This doesn't even apply to you. I get that. But we just want to make sure that everybody is covered on this, because you got to know this stuff to make a good, sound business decision.
I agree. Speaking of good, sound business decisions, the world has become a kind of a crazy place. We have wild volatility in oil prices right now. Have you watched what has been going on? And think about it. It was just a couple weeks ago, I was talking about the crazy volatility of gold and silver. That one was just out of the blue, but that was a wild swing in gold and silver valuations. They were all over the board, up and down and up and down. Now we watched fuel make a vertical climb on a chart. It went straight up in no time. I think we peaked around $120 a barrel. And oil at $120 a barrel that's a lot. Everything will get expensive. That's hard on the economy. That didn't even last a day, and it was back down to 86 again. I think it's kind of bouncing around down there somewhere, but the fuel price hasn't come back down yet. So one of the things I'm going to be trying to help people a lot with, and a lot of my social media posting, is just fuel is really expensive, and there are things you can do immediately to lower your fuel cost, and you should be doing them. And here's the big one. It's the one nobody wants to hear. What do you think I'm going to say?
Slow down.
Slow down. Jeez, this is so easy. Slow down.
Yeah.
I see people get the opposite when this starts happening. It's like they're in panic mode, and they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, thinking they got to run harder to make more money. No, slow your ass down. There's a huge savings, and it happens instantly. If you're hearing me right now and you're running 70 plus, slow down to 65. You immediately start saving money.
Yeah. They always said every mile per hour over 64, I think was the magic number, is worth about 1/10 of a mile per gallon on fuel economy.
It can really start at about 55, 50 even. So there's a break there in the 50 to 55 range. Under that speed, rolling resistance is a bigger factor than aerodynamics. It's when you get above that. But here's the thing. Every time you speed up, you increase all of the forces that rob you of fuel mileage. Rolling resistance gets bigger the faster you go. Wind resistance gets really bigger. That's exponential. But you're also working the engine harder. To move 80,000 pounds down the road, to go a little faster takes a lot more energy. That's exponential as well. So slowing down, and then I'm going to lose so much time. Yeah, I've done the math, and I actually have AI trying to work on this project, because what people tend to do is when they're thinking about slowing down, they do it as straight math. If I'm driving 70 for 10 hours, I get 700 miles. If I'm driving 55, I get 550 miles. That sounds logical. It's math, but it doesn't work that way in the real world, ever. It's never that straightforward. It always leans toward you won't lose nearly as much time as you think you're going to lose. It never works the other way. It always is you think you're going to save X or you're going to get this many more miles. You never will. Now, it's hard to quantify, though. So I've got AI working on that project to see if there's some way we could quantify this or get closer. I have found that I have had people who have been documenting this kind of stuff for years slow down 10 miles per hour and year after year get the same number of miles they've always gotten. They don't lose any miles at all, none. And yet they saved, if we go with your number, which is absolutely correct. I was just typing that in to the AI project. 1 mile per hour is about 1/10 of a mile per gallon in either direction. Slow down 1 mile per hour, you're going to gain about 1/10. That means if you slow down 10 miles per hour, you save a full mile per gallon. And it does work. It really works. That number's been accurate for a long time. And based on the fuel prices we could be looking at right now, I think we're still at like 486. That 1 mile per gallon is over $10,000 a year.
I want to run the math with you because I saw fuel in PA this weekend at $5.19 a gallon, and that for the taxes. But let's say that you are, and this is, I'm going to do the straight math here. You're running 70 miles per hour everywhere you go, and you are averaging 7 miles per gallon, and you run 100,000 miles per year. So if we take 100,000 miles per year, divide it by 7, that's 14,285.71 gallons of fuel.
Yep.
I'm going to take that at today's prices, say at $5 a gallon in PA. That means you're spending $71,428 a year just in fuel.
Yes.
So if we knock that down, let's take that same 100,000 miles per year driven, divide that by 7.5, because we're going to slow down 5 miles per hour to pick up a half a mile per gallon.
Perfect.
You are now 13,333 gallons of fuel times $5 per gallon. You are now at $66,666.
Yeah. So
you just saved $5,000 by slowing down.
Yep.
And that's on a higher scale. The worse baseline mileage you get, the more return you get too. So if you're averaging like say 5.5, your return on investment is going to be even higher.
Yeah.
Because it averages out on more on the bottom side.
It's much, much bigger. Actually, you get up to the hyper mileage stuff like we talk about on Thursdays, the savings are much, much smaller. So when you start getting up there 10 plus miles to the gallon, you have to relook at strategies and do they still make sense? Does it make sense for me to spend all this money to gain 0.2 of a mile per gallon? A lot of times it doesn't anymore. But if you're at 6 miles to the gallon, it absolutely makes sense to spend that to get 0.2, because 0.2 is a much bigger savings. Bruce is here with us. Bruce, good morning.
Good.
We're talking all about fuel mileage and fuel cost because of what's happened with fuel prices. And speaking of the hypermiles, I just posted this yesterday. Steve Krohn's new International, his S13. You know what his fuel mileage is for the last 30 days? 12.3.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, 30 days, 12.3. That truck isn't broken in yet. Uh-oh, Bruce, you're breaking up really bad, like a bad cell signal.
That's all.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Bruce, I'm gonna put you back in the queue, and Angie, if you could try to figure out Bruce's line. Usually, when they're that bad, they're not going to get any worse, or they're not going to get any better. See if we can fix that. Yeah, 12.3.
I just ran the numbers again while we were talking there. If you're starting out at 5 miles per gallon and bumping up to 5.5, the same 100,000 miles per year at $5 a gallon, that's $10,000 you're saving a year.
So here's the ironic part. This is almost across the board in this industry. We are so backwards. You just showed how much more powerful this is, the worse your fuel economy is. Here's the ironic part.
Yes.
Everybody in this industry who is in a segment that gets less fuel economy than everybody else because of physics. You're non-aerodynamic, open deck. That's a problem. Weight, that's a problem. There's all kinds of things that car haulers, horrible fuel economy typically. The people getting the worst fuel economy should put the most time, effort, and money into improving it because their returns are so much bigger. And yet the attitude is always, well, everybody in my segment gets lousy fuel mileage, so why bother? That is the absolute wrong. I talked to somebody yesterday. He was pulling heavy up to 120,000 pounds. But listen to this truck. Honestly, I can't imagine a worse truck. It was a Coronado with an 05 Coronado with a 14-liter emission engine. It had 370 gears and a 10-speed manual. I mean, what a awful setup. I mean, absolutely awful in every way I can think of. He was getting 4 miles to the gallon, and he said, why bother? And I said, why bother? We could go buy a $20,000 truck today and double that fuel mileage.
Yeah. And you would pay for that truck within the first, 10 months?
Yeah. Yeah. And he was all worried about the weight. He's like, well, you know, I saw some trucks the other day and I was thinking about them, but they had 13 liters in them. Yeah. So what? Why do we think a 13-liter engine is small? This still makes me crazy. 13 liters is plenty to pull around that kind of weight. John Bickner, the guy that, is on our show on Thursdays, that's what he does in Canada. The big, heavy aggregate B trains, that kind of stuff. He's getting darn close to 8 miles to the gallon because he's done everything you can think of. And he's pulled some of those weights with the D11.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
This is where technology has really stepped up to the plate. And it's not just in the Class 8 trucks either. We've talked about this before. It's your SUV at home.
Yeah.
It's your sports car, everything. There are so many cars manufactured out there that are going to smaller liter displacement and a turbocharger. And they're getting phenomenal numbers. Fuel mileage, lifespan, horsepower.
The European model. I mean, they've been doing that forever.
Yep. You look at the size of their delivery trucks from DHL and stuff over there. They're these little tiny minivans.
Yes.
And they make it go.
With 2-liter turbocharged diesels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
2
they
liters.
get,
yeah.
And power out of them.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. The one of the options, and I don't know if it still exists in the Sprinter or not, but our first Sprinter had a 1.9 liter, I think.
Yeah. I remember I had a
It-
I had a bunch of them. The Ford Escort GTs. They had a 1.9 liter naturally aspirated, and on a good day, it might have been like 120 horsepower.
Right.
I got a gallon, but you take that same 1 liter technology and you add a turbocharger, and now you can make 300 horsepower, 350 even.
Well,
I mean, it's great.
one of my favorite cars was the first BMW I ever bought, and I bought a used 3 Series, and it was a 318. That's a 1.8 liter engine. I'll tell you, that thing was really impressive on an on-ramp. I was shocked at how much speed you could get out of that thing on an on-ramp, or how responsive it was when you were already doing 60 and wanted to go faster.
Yep. I bought my wife a new Ford Escape in 2015 when they changed that body style. It was a 1.6 liter turbo. They had the 1.6, they had the 2.0 turbo, and I thought, well, she doesn't need anything more, because the 1.6 was, I think it was pushing like 200 horsepower, 220.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, okay, I got to grow up now. I got to get a 4-door. We got 2 baby seats,
Right.
Okay. Up for test drive. I'm like, good God, this thing's got some snot. I mean,
I know.
I had a blast with that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, technology has really stepped up to the plate on everything. And we're seeing that now with the new trucks.
Yes.
The Cummins is figuring out the 9 and the 12 liter engines are going to come out with a 10 liter to replace both of them.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the new norm.
Right.
So we're going to see a lot more of this down the pipeline.
All right. So I'm going to be talking a lot about fuel mileage as long as these fuel prices are going to go crazy like this. Bruce, do we have you back now?
Yes.
You sound
you do.
much better now. Good morning.
Good morning.
What?
So, I was at who made the Cheeseburger in Paradise song?
Jimmy Buffett.
Jimmy Buffett. I was at a concert last night at our local church here in Florida, and they had the Jimmy Buffett tribute band. And this guy playing the tenor sax looked just like you, built like you, a little bit stockier. And he was one hell of a tenor sax player. And every time he played and stood out in front, I just thought of Kevin. But anyway.
Well, wait a minute, Bruce. I
like
thought you actually played the tenor sax.
No, I played the alto.
Altos.
Alto
Yeah,
sax.
that's right. Alto.
Yeah, I played the alto, and I gave it up for baseball. Big mistake in life. We all make mistakes in life, and that was one of them.
So, Bruce, the Bob Seger, the band. Do you know what the saxophone player's name is?
Kevin Rutherford.
No. Much more creative. Alto Reed.
Wow.
That's his name, Alto Reed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there are some other Kevin Rutherfords in this world, and it's kind of surprising when you see the name. But I've got a little story here.
Just a quick story on that. I won't take a lot of time. But when I was like 13 or 14, and I lived in a small town, not far from Pittsburgh, you know where I lived, and everything west of us, for the most part, was farmland. We were kind of the end of the kind of suburbs and small towns. Then there was a lot of farmland. Next town over, and they were our big rival in school. There was a kid in that school, and his name was Kevin Rutherford. When he was 14, he died. And everybody thought it was me. When it was in the paper, everybody thought it was me, and they were calling the family, and yeah, it was kind of weird.
So this story is not about trucking, but there is a truck involved. And a fellow that works with me in Maryland, he's from Guatemala. His wife's from El Salvador, and she wanted a Jeep. very quiet Spanish lady. Well, she got a Jeep. She's got a white Jeep around 2018 or 19. She starts, everybody's waving to her, giving her these little duckies. And now she's starting to see all the accessories she could buy for this Jeep. This was this past summer. And so the Jeep's getting accessorized. So Lazaro, an owner-operator client of ours, his parents are immigrants from Cuba. And we tuned up his dad's 60 Series D-Deck 4 and a T600 years ago. And before we had a dyno, and I mean, we were given more power than we do now. No, it was his dad. His dad never spoke English, but his mother did. And his dad was thrilled. So Lazaro the son bought a Freightliner with a D-Deck 4 in it. And he does his own rebuilds now. And he lives up around Gainesville, Florida. And he bought 10 acres and raises his own food. He's kind of following your footsteps there.
There you go.
Has cattle and chickens and planting. So his wife is Spanish, and she wanted a Jeep, and she also ended up with a white Jeep. And then she discovered, this conversation was last night, by the way. She discovered the accessories. He said, there's more stuff for a Jeep than there is for my Freightliner.
I'll bet.
And he said, now she wants a winch. He said, but we're not going to go off-road. Why do you want a winch? I want a winch.
Because they look cool.
So here's two Spanish ladies whose lives have changed because of a vehicle. I like that. I think it's a hoot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway.
Somebody posted some version of a Jeep. It was what's their more extreme off-road? I always forget the name of that line.
Rubicon.
The Rubicon. Yeah, this was a Rubicon, pretty high-end, and then they really tricked it out. And if I remember right, the price was $127.
Well, I know a guy who used to work for us as a mechanic. He paid $95 for one several years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
So I can believe $127 now. Yeah. That's also 425 or 450 horsepower.
Are they really? I didn't know that.
So,
Holy cow.
Yeah, they're that high now. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They're up in the mid 400s and maybe even higher.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So then on Facebook, I saw my good friend Dean Cross getting towed into Ray Mass garage in Middlebury, Indiana. And I thought, oh, you got to be kidding me. I hope Dean's not broke down again. But why would it be on a hook? So I called him immediately on his cell phone. And here he was smelling rubber. And it was the carrier bearing. And all the rubber disintegrated in the carrier bearing. And he could smell it. And that's how he determined it, because he got underneath the truck. And the rubber was completely gone. So when you first smell something and you're going down a highway, you think, is it in my truck?
Right.
Or is it a truck near me?
Right.
Right? You're always hoping it's somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you put the windows down and you kind of clear out the air. And if it's a truck in front of you, it's not going to clear out. Or if it's you, it's not going to clear out. But Dean determined it was coming from his truck. And I said, well, Dean, we talk about redoing drive shafts every 500, 800,000 miles. He said, this drive shaft, excuse me, was done 200,000 miles ago. So why did a carrier bearing fail at 200,000 miles?
Right.
Well, we are dealing with mechanical parts here, and the mechanical part can fail at any given time. And I know Dean's a very gentle driver. And so there you go, 200,000 miles and the carrier bearing went.
So let me ask you this. How often, now, the idea of just rebuilding it every 500,000, good preventative maintenance, if that's not being done, and a lot of people don't do that, how often are you seeing failures of those parts in the driveline? Seems to me like I haven't seen those kind of failures in years. Like it's rare anymore.
Right. But when a drive shaft starts to wear out and bend, and they do bend, the vibrations start very slow, and it's like wore out shock absorbers, wore out tires. Your body just gets used to it. And then when you do have the drive shaft rebuilt, you have it straightened and you have it balanced, new U-joints, new carrier bearings, then you get to feel the difference. The same with the torsional damper on the front of the crank.
Yeah. Yeah. That
And
makes sense.
have we discussed that Chris Gamble passed away? And he made our engine balancers, the mercury-filled engine balancers.
I don't believe we did.
I don't either. This has been about a month now. So what we have in stock, that's going to be the end, unless, Eric, have you and Sean tried to get a hold of the employees to see if they're going to keep the company going?
We've tried to reach out to them numerous times. We haven't had any luck.
So the mercury-filled engine balancer that we developed back in the late 90s is coming to an end. Do you know about how many we have left in stock?
So, Bruce, hold on a second. Was that Balance Masters?
Yes.
That's Chris?
Yes.
That's Chris.
Boy, I haven't seen
You know, the
Chris
guy that
in
made
probably 15 plus years. Wow.
Oh, no. You saw him in Louisville. He was, when we were in the West Wing, he was catty corner to us, kind of almost right straight across from Brad from Fuel Preparator.
Yeah, I haven't run into him at the show. I probably just missed him there.
And remember when True Balance was working with him?
Yeah,
They were side
absolutely.
by side.
Absolutely. We were a big part of getting those two together. We had found
That's right.
True Balance really, really early when they were just getting started. And we kind of helped with all that. And then they were working, but I haven't seen Chris in a long time. I must have missed him at the show. Oh.
Yeah, Chris. Well, Chris was up to the, we saw Chris the last time we were in the West Wing.
Yeah, I may have just missed him. You know, sometimes that show
Yeah.
is so hectic. I think the last time I saw Chris would have been at a CMC a long time ago. The way I remember it.
So unfortunately, he left this earth. So.
Yeah. Too much of that going on. We got to put a stop to that.
Yeah, I'll say.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
All right. What else we got?
Let me see. Dave Stone, TNS Marine. He's big into Caterpillar Marines out in Chrisfield, Maryland, in the Eastern Shore. I had this industrial Caterpillar water pump off of tugboats that we thought maybe needed rebuilt. And he and I had a nice conversation yesterday. And he knows me and I've known him, and we've never met, just on the phone. And he said, Bruce, how many hours are on that? And I said, about 1,800 hours. He said, even though it's 26 years old, he said, those things run 8,000 to 10,000 hours. So I know you had one fail, but this one should not fail and be okay. And if I were you, I wouldn't rebuild it. And I thanked him. I said, well, you remind me of myself, because we talk a lot of people out of rebuilding their engines. People want to rebuild engines just because of miles. And I said, no, we rebuild engines because of oil consumption. Yes. And so it was nice to see another shop feel the same way about me. And I mean, feel the same way that I do. And I said to him, I said, Dave, do you believe in karma? He said, absolutely. I said, me too, buddy. So,
hey, Bruce, Eric and I started talking about this earlier, and then we got sidetracked. I had this same question. Forever, diesel engines burned oil, brand new in frame. They all burned a little bit of oil. We knew the numbers, 10 to 15,000 miles a gallon. You'd be happy. And basically, when it got down under 4,000 miles a gallon, you started planning the in frame. And if you wanted to push it, you let it get down to 2,000, and then you did the in frame. We've been doing that for decades, right?
Correct.
What are we doing now when I'm seeing some million-mile engines that don't burn any oil yet?
You just keep going.
I guess so. It seems so odd. They
If
haven't
you
even
have a million
started
miles,
to burn oil yet.
yeah. If you're at 1,000,000 miles, you just keep going, because we've seen some N14s run over 2,000,000 miles.
You're right. You're right. And that was the older
we took
technology.
an N14. Yeah. We took an N14 apart several years ago that had 1,000,002. And whenever we pulled the heads off, I looked at the crosshatch. I wanted to put the heads back on.
Yeah.
Guy says, no, go ahead and just put cylinder kits in it and rebuild it.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. It's hard to imagine what we're going to do with some of these, trucks with 1,000,005 on them. Are we just going to keep running them?
Well,
I guess.
yeah, keep running.
Yeah.
Because if you're not getting ingested dirt, if you're not getting the silicone, whatever you want to call it, if your numbers are low on that, you're running the max mileage catalyst and you're burning the soot and carbon in the combustion chamber, you're in good shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jake Floyd runs one of our tunes in a D-Deck4. I just got a message from him, and he stopped the catalyst for a couple months, and then he just started it again. Now, this is a non-emissions truck, and he said, I can see the difference now. I can see the soot and carbon being burned because it's coming out the stack. And that's so true.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. All right, what do you say we take some calls?
Please.
We've got one on the line right now. That's it. A lot of times calls don't start coming in until after we stop yapping and telling stories. So now is the time. Pick up the phone and jump in and join us. 855-950-3835. Hit that call now button on your app, and we will get to your calls and questions. We've got an hour left, so plenty of time. Jump in and join us. Let's go to Indiana. Stephen, welcome.
Hey guys, I wanted to talk to you guys about the new Scout that is coming out, the electric vehicle. But I want to talk to you about something else that just happened last week with my truck, and it points out how important electrical cleaner and the OTR device is. So I've got the 18 Cascadia with just approaching 1,400,000 on it, and I put in new injectors at 1,060,000, and last week I had a check engine light come on, injector number 5, amplifier something issue going on, running like crap. So we get it into Freightliner. They do what they're supposed to do. They read a code, they diagnose it. They said you need the injector 5 and we're going to put a new harness in with it. So I said, okay. So they put a new injector, new harness, close everything up Monday night out of Salt Lake City, Utah. We run over to Michigan, unload, reload, run to California, unload, reload. Everything seems fine. We go to get on the highway, and mill light, check engine light, spit sputtering, running like crap. So I pull it over. I hook up my OTR device, and again, injector number 5, high voltage. I'm like, what in the world? They just went through this. So I clear the codes, open the hood, I unplug the 2 injector harnesses, I just blow in them a little bit to try to clean out the connection, plug them back in, make sure they're secure, go back into the truck, start the truck. Within seconds, mill light and check engine light come back on. So I hook up the OTR, and it's another code, but it's a different code. I'm like, what in the world? The code changed just like that? So I go back out to the truck, I mess with the wire harnesses, I clear the codes, go back out to the truck, start the truck up, engine light comes back on. Hook up the OTR. Now my Jake brake is sending a code. no injector code. I'm like, what in the world? Now I no injector code, but now my Jake brake is sending a code and my Jake brake is off. So I do the same thing twice. I go back out, I come back in, and we Google it some more, and it just talks about, the connectors could just be really dirty. So I'm like, you know what? I got my air gun attached to the seat, so I'm going to go out there with my air gun, some high pressure air. So I go out there, I spray out the connector on the injector harnesses, and I felt debris literally come out of the connector when I sprayed in. So I'm like, well, maybe. So I plugged the connectors back in, and we've been running fine ever since we left California. So hindsight, I don't think I needed injectors. I think it was just the connector is just, it's the...
Hi, I'm Kevin Rutherford. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe or leave a comment below. It really helps us get the show out to more people. If you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, you can sign up with the link below.